Hey everybody, Tom Sega from Duluth Pack, and this is the Duluth Pack podcast, Leader of the Pack. Our very special guest today is a guy I've known for a long time. Boy, that's aging us. Is Dan Hartel of Hartel's DBJ Disposal Company. Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Tom. Glad to be here.
This is going to be a lot of fun because we're going to learn about an industry that I think a lot of us take for granted because we put our trash cans out at the end of the driveway and they disappear and we're all happy and away it goes. And we really maybe don't understand what all goes into your industry. So I'm super excited to talk about it today and learn a bunch from you. But Dan, let's start this way. Tell us about your youth. Tell us about where did you grow up, and then we'll move our way forward to how you got into the disposal business.
Sure. I grew up in the West End, and I call it the West End. If you've grown up from down there, it's not Lincoln Park District that it is today. It was the West End, and I grew up right down by the Ore Docks, right above A&Dubs. That's our reference point. Everybody knows where A&Dubs is. Block up from there. So my dad run our business, or his little company at that point, out of our little house in the West End, and went to Denfeld for high school, and just basically caroused around the West End into West Duluth. My mom used to tell me I could never go on the other side of Mesabi Avenue. That was not meant for me, so I don't think I got over there till I finally got a driver's license. But good place to live down by Wheeler Field, so a lot of recreation, good neighborhoods back then. Big kids, the neighbors across the street from us had 11 kids, so basically only needed a couple more and you could go play ball every day or walk down to Wheeler hockey. Down there, I was my first hockey coach was Ray Peterson, and that's a great history name. Peterson Arena was named after him, and he was my first coach. And he was such a great man. We would go down there, and his wife would bake us cookies, and we would play hockey all day, shinny hockey, like you've learned from Hermantown. But we did that out of Wheeler Field. They had their own hockey rink down there, and barely enough kids ever to field a team. I think the first level we had was Pee Wees. So I was playing Pee Wee hockey when I was, I don't know, 7, 8 years old, and not good enough or big enough even to play, but they didn't have enough kids, so they formed a Pee Wee team, and everybody that wanted to play was on that. So it was a great place to grow up. Like I say, always had something to do up at the Ore Docks. You could go up and throw rocks at pigeons, or go over and play ball or hockey or whatever. So it was.
And you're talking, Dan, about the West End of Duluth, Minnesota, for our listeners who aren't from the area, which there's known as West Duluth, West End, East Duluth, Lakeside.
Yeah.
So it's a big, long city. And there were certain, you're mentioning there that you weren't allowed to go past Mesaba Avenue. And there was kind of some borders that, as we grew up in towns, and I think our listeners probably saw that, oh, you don't cross that street there.
Oh yeah, there was some big, West End, West Duluth, very territorial. So there was, back then you had your neighborhood. I don't say gangs, but you had your neighborhood groups, and a lot of the sports you played was against those other rinks that were in those other neighborhoods, or ball teams, and so there was always competition there. And then there was just a life competition that went on, and different things. But Duluth was a great, it was like cities inside of cities, back then. And I'm talking, back when I grew up, Duluth's population was in 120,000. It hadn't, dispersed out to the suburbs like it has now. So everybody was still kind of inside of the Duluth proper. So lots of activities, lots of stuff, and it was some good times. There wasn't what was going on today. Kids could, ride their bike anywhere and play out, play games all night long, and not worried about somebody coming to take you away or anything like you got now. So
Exactly. And so when your dad was in business first, and was that your plan? Is that, hey, you know what, Dad, sometime I would like to come and take over your business?
well, not really. I guess the history was my dad started in 1952, so he was the very first garbage hauler in the city of Duluth. Nobody else. Back then, everybody either burned their trash or had their little neighborhood dumps, all throughout the city. So the story goes that my dad was very social, liked to have a few pops once in a while, and he owned a Texaco station down in the West End, down kind of where Quick Trip is right now. There was an old Leo's Texaco, it was called, and over in that area. So he was doing that, running his little car shop after he got out of the military. And somebody told him, hey, somebody should start a garbage route. And he's like, hey, that's a pretty cool idea. So he kind of took that ball and run with it. And the city, I don't know who in the city kind of got him going, but he would start getting calls from different neighbors or different neighborhoods. Hey, can you come pick up my garbage? And it started that way, and it all of a sudden snowballed on him. And he was only one guy and one truck, and all of a sudden he was getting calls from all over the city and had more people wanting his services than he could probably perform. And he really didn't have any ambition other than to make a living, and raise our family. We had three kids. I was the youngest of three. And so he started calling his buddies and saying, hey, you want to get in the garbage business? And they'd say, yeah, maybe. Well, get a truck and I'll give you this area. And you take all the people that come out of this area. So the first three guys were kind of leads that he set up to a couple of his buddies that, hey, there's a business here. So, and then it just took off from there once part of the city started getting these services and finding a better way to not burn all this stuff or throw it in a ditch. It kind of blossomed from there. So he was, like I say, he started the whole process. We had our route that we had back then is we serviced all of Proctor. That was a area that wanted service, so he went up there. And we had West Duluth and out to Norton Park. We didn't go much past Norton Park. So that was kind of his route. He had 4 days of work in those little neighborhoods, and that's what we did. So, everybody worked for my dad, all the neighborhood kids. He would try to take a couple months off in the summer. So he'd hire the neighbor kids to work on the route with my uncle. My uncle was the only other employee that was on the route with my dad. It was my dad and my uncle. And so he'd take the summer off and give a neighborhood kid, make some money. And like I say, it was kind of handy to have a family of 8 boys across the street, because every year one of them was ready to go on the truck and make some money and pick up all the jewels and gems that you find on the route and haul it home and put it in the garage, and then have dad chew you out because you're bringing home more than you're throwing away. And so we always had that going. And then as my brother got older, then he became the summer guy. And then eventually I got old enough and I was a summer guy. So I didn't really have ambitions at that time. I was, didn't know what I was going to do. It was always, an option. My brother, he moved away before my dad was ready to retire. So he had to pursue a different career. So I was being the youngest, it was, if anybody was going to take over the business, it was probably going to be me. But my dad was, still pretty young at that time. And then what happened was, basically my fate was kind of delivered to me by, not by choice. So my uncle, like I said, I think I talked to you before, but I'll talk about it now. Back in those days, the hauling trash was nothing like it is today. There was no recycling, so everybody had 2 or 3 big cans of garbage full every week. Nobody said anything out. It was behind their house, it was in their garage, it might be down their basement. And we walked in for every account. and loaded it into what we call a carrying can, 60 and 80 gallon cans that we would pack this garbage in. And as young kids, you'd then throw it up on your shoulder and haul it out to the truck that was sitting out on the road. So you might make one trip or you might make two trip. And as you got, I don't say smarter, as you got lazier, you tried to put two trips into one trip and load the barrel so heavy you couldn't lift it or hurt yourself. And so, to put it in perspective, back in those days, Tom, a big day for us was 200 homes. We might pick up 200 homes in a day, and that was you were exhausted. That was 8 to 10 hours of physical labor, start to finish. Drive the truck up to the next stop, get out, get your can, go behind the house. In the winter, walk through snow up to your armpits. I know it's the old cliche, uphill both ways, but it pretty much was. The garbage, most people didn't concern too much about where their garbage was and whether it was cleaned out like you have to today. So anyhow, we did that, and in perspective, today our trucks will do 800 to 900 homes in a day. So technology and moving the cans out and using technology, the different trucks and the carts, that's what that's done compared to, max we could do back then with two guys was a couple hundred.
Dan, I remember back when I was young, we all had metal trash cans at our house. Yeah. And like you just alluded to, we never put them out on the curb like everyone does now. We just, everyone rolls the cans out there. But you guys would come, because I remember I would be, you'd wake me up, for crying out loud, the garbage guys, because they're banging these metal cans around early in the morning, putting them in and hauling them out. Let's talk about injuries for people back in the day, because they were lugging a lot of weight all day long. Like you said, 200 homes a day of lugging a lot of weight.
Yeah, everybody that did that for a living, and they're probably my generation, maybe a couple of years past me, and then it started to go away, but everybody had a bad back. I remember the chiropractor that my dad used, he'd come right to our house. We couldn't even we were so banged up, and I started going to the chiropractor when I was 12 years old. That was just, it was just part of life, right? You knew you were going to bang up your body, and it was a physical, you were out in the elements, so you usually hurt your back. Many people had to have back surgeries or had permanent damage like I have. But it was just, that's the way it was. There was no technology back then. That's the only way it was done, and it was done that way everywhere. So it wasn't, we were stubborn.
Dan, when you filled your truck, how many, back in the day when they had the trucks, when you're hauling it out and dumping it in the truck, and you did 200 homes a day, how many trips would that mean to wherever you would offload? And was that the city dump you'd offload, or where did you go for offloading?
Yep. We'd only do one load a day because we just didn't have time to do any more. And it was an hour plus drive from our routes in West Duluth up to Rice Lake landfill, right where the current MRC is up there on the Rice Lake. That was the original landfill, the only landfill Duluth ever had. And that's where we would go. So we'd go up there and dump once a day, and then go back and work some more, and whatever was on the truck for the next day we'd start usually. And that was a time we'd eat your lunch on the way up, maybe, because there was no stopping for lunch. Dad would once in a while, if it was super 20 below, he might let us go in and get a hot cup of soup somewhere at a restaurant. But usually we're eating a sandwich, driving down the road, bouncing on the way up to the landfill. So yeah, it was a whole different time, and you took it up there. But that's kind of how I got started. So my uncle hurt his back to a point where he needed to have back surgery. And, my dad was working with him, and all of a sudden we were at a crossroads. I remember I was about, I don't know, 15 years old. So back in the early 70s. And it was, my uncle definitely needed to go have back surgery. My dad's back was bad. And my folks were trying to decide if they were going to stay in this business or sell it. And, I was young and coming, and I thought, what, maybe it is meant for me. So I remember sitting down with them, pretty green behind the years, not really knowing what I was getting into, but I'd been working on the truck and I decided that, I thought I should be involved in a family business. So I begged them to give me a chance and they did. And I ended up my high school years, they were, I wouldn't trade anything for what's happened, but I had a lot of growing up to do, right? So back then you went to school in your senior years, you remember, Tom, wasn't too tough. It was usually a pretty fun time because you maybe only went to school for a few hours and you had a lot of free time. Well, because I had to work, I worked 4 days a week on the truck and then went to school after that. And then Fridays I would be there. I had to put in a ton of hours. So I graduated actually a year earlier than my class because I needed to work for our family business. And then I'd go to school. My senior year, I hated it. My friends would be out running around having fun, and I'd have to stay there till 4:30 to get enough hours in so I could get this diploma. But it was important to me as much as my parents. I didn't want to be a high school dropout. I wanted to, finish my school, and so I ended up going to work full time when I was a junior in high school and getting my diploma in January of that year. And then from then on, it was full steam ahead. And then my dad hurt himself very soon after that. And then we had another issue, but it worked out pretty well because my cousin, my uncle's son, he had been working in the business and he wanted to come aboard. So we made him an offer to come work for us, and eventually him and I became partners, Jeff Wallstrom and myself. So it kind of worked itself out. So we ended up kind of inheriting it from both of our parents. Jeff's dad wasn't a partner, but Jeff became a partner after we put the whole thing together.
Dan, what year was that when first of all you took over, and then when your cousin came in and became your partner?
Yeah, I saw. Well, we took over. I took over in '77, and we ended up purchasing a small route right after that in the Denfeld area in '82. And I ended up that was my first venture in owning a business. So we bought a single day from a guy by the name of Butch Larson's Garbage Service back in 1982. And that helped fill our route to a 5 day a week route. My dad originally had Monday through Thursday. And so being a younger guy, we figured we got to work 5 days a week. So we ended up buying that route. And in '83, I bought that from Butch. And then '87 is when my cousin and I purchased my dad's business from him and rebranded it at that point. So 1987 was the official takeover from my parents' business.
So, Dan, from when you first started in the business, where you were talking about lugging the big containers and all of that, can you tell us when it went to more technology? Because today we see the big arm coming out from the truck, and they can get it from either side of the truck, and it dumps it in the truck and compacts it and does all of that. When did that start transpiring?
Yeah, so Duluth originally had, I believe our high point, we had 35 garbage haulers at one time. So all single operator, one truck guys that had their little neighborhoods and Duluth and surrounding area. So it was very saturated. A lot of guys were out there. And there was a couple things that happened that really consolidated down the industry. And that's when technology showed up. So I would say about 1980, 1990, recycling was proposed. So it was a mandate. So October of 1990, I remember that date, Tom. I don't know why. My wife will ask me what her birthday is. I sometimes don't remember that. But I know October of 1990 because it was a big, big deal for us on how we were going to now implement this recycling program that nobody had ever done before. And that allowed our company a big opportunity because a lot of the guys that were my dad's age, these owner operators, they were close to retirement and they were like, no, we don't want to do that. We're not going to invest in new technology, new equipment. We just want to retire. So it gave us an opportunity to acquire quite a few of those guys. And at that point, we knew we had to grow to survive, synergies needed to happen. And at the same time, one of the largest independent guys, they sold their company to a big national firm. So that's when the nationals showed up in Duluth on the horizon. And that was a pretty alarming time for all of us small guys, because we've never competed with, massive, national companies. So they came to town, and of course they brought the technology with them. And for the first couple of years, we fought it a little bit because it was a change, and we used it as a marketing technique to try to convince people it wasn't the way to go. And if you didn't like change, you should hire us, and we'd do it the old way. But I think after a couple of years, we seen that, yeah, that's the direction it's got to go. And we jumped aboard. And so that was I would say in around 1992 is when that technology came. And the technology was those carts, right? So that cart allowed you to get that can out to the end of your driveway. And then it allowed us to use a special piece of equipment to dump it without a human, having to grab it physically.
That had to be some massive capital undertaking for you, because you're going from the old style to all of a sudden you have to purchase your own cans to for free of charge let your customers use, and then all new infrastructure from a truck standpoint, because now you have to be able to get these new rolling cans into your truck. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that was our biggest challenge at that point. But like I said, it gave us the opportunity to acquire a bunch of guys that thought about it in a different perspective from, I don't want to spend that capital. I don't want to have to deal with this rollout. I don't want to have to, develop this technology, because it really wasn't perfected at that time. It was out there, but it hadn't been used in Duluth, Minnesota, with the winters and our streets and our alleys and all the challenges this town has. So we seen that we had to go all in. So we figured we would try to grow and get saturation across the city. We wanted to be able to service the whole city, and at this time we were still kind of western hauler. We didn't go much past the middle part of the town. So it allowed us to say, okay, we're going to get in. We're going to offer. We knew once the people got the carts, they would eventually learn to love them, which they did, and they still do. But we had to get over that hump, right? So we spent a lot of money, picking out our carts and getting them branded to our name, and then finding the right truck. We went and found a truck that we had specifically built for us from a company in Canada. I remember that. What we tried to do that was different than anywhere else in the country, and we've actually perfected it since then, was we were able to do semi-automated pickup at that time, and we could travel one direction and get both sides of the truck. So we built these stand-up drive trucks you could drive from either side. The driver would just step out, dump a cart, walk around, dump the other side. So in the alleys, they worked tremendous. And all the other technology that was in the industry at that time was one-sided. So you'd have to drive down one side, turn around, go back. So you'd run double the miles that we ended up doing with our trucks that we had specifically built. So we felt that was a technology that was going to put us ahead of our competition, because we were going to run less miles, but we were able to outproduce them for stops per hour because we didn't have all that wasted time. Now, the downside of that was, and at that time it wasn't, labor was abundant. Hardworking was a common thing, but it was still physical. You had to get in and out of the truck compared to sitting there like we do today. So we still had a lot of good workers, but as they started to get older, that was starting to be a challenge. So, they were not loving that physicalness of getting in and out. Yeah, it was better than the original days, but still not as good as where it went. So that's when we finally, I don't know what year that was probably, I don't know, 15 years ago. So in the early 2000s, we developed another truck with another manufacturer, and we built our fab shop built the first automated arm that's on both sides of the truck like we currently use. And we invented that with a company by the name of Perkins Manufacturing. They gave us an arm that they had this idea, and they said, "Hey, would you guys?" We had been buying stuff from them and working with them over the years, our fab shop. And they said, "Hey, would you guys be interested in taking this and seeing if it's any good? We want to try to bring it to market." And I said, "Yeah, we'll check it out." We destroyed the first one. I don't know how many times. We probably rebuilt it about 20 times because it wasn't strong enough. And we ended up a year later giving them a prototype that we helped build, and they went into production with it, and they still sell it today. And it's obviously been advanced a few years since then, but it allows us to go down the streets and service both sides of the alleys. And that's not a common thing in the country, right, Tom? So there's only, I don't know what the percentage is, but I'm going to say it's under 20%. It might even be around 15% of the country that has alleys. We think, hey, everybody's got it, right? We're used to it. But most parts of the country don't. So for me, it's challenging because I don't understand why everybody doesn't do what I'm doing, because it's like, this makes total sense. Well, then the manufacturers tell me, well, there's no market there because there's just not enough people that have that application. And I go, oh, now I get it. That's why nobody's pushed this, down the path earlier, because really 85% of the country can use the single arm and it works very effectively. So it was something that I've always embraced. I kind of call myself, I'm not really an inventor, but I'm really good at taking somebody else's idea and making it better. And we do that all the time. I mean, we have a full fabrication facility, and that's basically what they do. We'll take a brand new truck, and it doesn't go out for at least a month, and it's almost shameful. We'll cut it apart the day we get it, and it comes beautiful, and we're cutting things off it and adding things, and because we have to have it a certain way. And you can't buy things exactly the way you want them specifically anymore, because the country's turned into we make a lot of products, but we've had to downsize our book of business, right? Everybody's had to stay with what their core business is. So we don't accept that one size fits all. I challenge everybody that works for me to, if you want the same result, you do it the same way. But if you want a better result, try to find a better way, right? And I know you've been successful with that since you've taken on your business. And I challenge all my people to say, yeah, I think we're pretty good at everything, but you've never perfected anything. There's always room for improvement, and you got to keep pushing. And we're not magical. We make a lot of mistakes, but we learn from them, and we learn, what worked. And I'm working with my kids now, they'll tend to want to follow the path that I've taken and say, well, we'll just do it that way, Dad. And I'm like, no, maybe we got to try something different. How do you know if something isn't better until you've either tried it and it's failed or showed you it's better, right? So we're not afraid to jump outside of our comfort level and try something different. We're cautious because mistakes can be very expensive in today's world, but you have to try things differently to find out if you are doing things the best way.
Challenging status quo.
Yep. And so we've done that with equipment. That's probably the biggest reason we're as successful as we are, because we've not done it the same old way everybody else has. Now, lots of challenges with that, Tom. We've many sleepless nights, and we've been fortunate enough to have the resources and the the tools and the people to do stuff like that. We've got some great people around us that, like I say, I just kind of quarterback the thing and try to keep the ship sailing, but you got to surround yourself with people that are certainly more skilled than I am. But you got to recognize that the biggest thing that I've found is you got to put people in position to succeed. And not everybody can do everything, right? I started this company, I've done every job in this company. And I used to do almost all of them, and now I can't. And and some of them I'm not even good at anymore. There's people that are better, right? So you got to find what you're good at, and surround yourself with people that can do the other stuff that maybe you're not the best at. And when you're a small business, you don't have the luxury of having somebody do everything for you, right? So you have to do it yourself. And my dad, God rest his soul, he didn't, and I'm turning into him because I find myself talking to my kids the same way he would talk to me and shake his head. But I remember hiring our first mechanic, whatever year that was, and he just could not understand that. I don't know why you would pay somebody to do something you could do yourself. And I'd say, well, let's see, Dad, I'm already working 20 hours a week trying to pick this stuff up, do the billing, keep the truck working, and I got a young family, and I know my wife someday is gonna go away. Hey, that ain't gonna work for me. And I said, you just can't do everything yourself. When he was owner operator and had one truck, you could do most everything yourself. He did the physical side. My mom did the billing. Many nights they'd just sit there in front of the radio and just write out postcards, and didn't have a computer. It was all done by hand. So it evolves, and you just have to find out what you're good at, and hopefully, I tell people all the time, find a niche and go with it, because that's key in today's world.
That's great advice, Dan, is that you surround yourself as a business owner and a leader, CEO of your company, with people that are really good at what they do to make the greater good better. Did you know that America's original manufacturer of canoe and kayak stabilizers was recently featured on Fox and Friends? Spring Creek Manufacturing was recognized on Fox News for being a leader in the Made in the USA industry for their top quality truck racks, the world's best camp saw, and their assortment of water sports equipment, including stabilizers for canoes, kayaks, and stand-up paddleboards, as well as their canoe seats and motor mounts. Enjoy an exclusive 15% off, yes, 15% off your next online order at springcreek.com with the code LEADER15, that is LEADER 15. Exclusions apply. Now, back to the podcast.
Yeah, we've have tremendous people working for us, Tom. We've been very fortunate. I think we hopefully got a culture that wants those good people to keep working for us. We have very little turnover. Many 25, 30-year drivers that are going to now retire because of technology. My office staff is full of 20-year veterans, with a mix of young as we're growing, but great group of people that get along. As you know, it's part of being the quarterback is you have to be the cheerleader, and you have to make everybody try to get along, and work is work, but we all got to tolerate each other, and we come here and hopefully not hate coming here, and do our job and go home and enjoy whatever we got after work. So yeah, it's been a little challenge. I'm self-taught. I didn't get to go to college. I learned a school of hard knocks, and I've taught myself everything I know, surrounded myself with people to help me. The business side is, I just learned that as I did it, and then the office and that kind of technology. When I was going to school, we didn't get any computer work. There was no such thing, and I got a typewriter. I think I was maybe I could type about 18 words a minute maybe back then. I wasn't getting a scholarship for that, but I was a pecker. I would hunt and peck and find my spots, but I remember my wife and I getting our first computer. It was funny. You know, we had a guy, we seen an ad somewhere in a magazine, and my wife said, if you think I'm sitting writing those postcards out like your mom did for 40 years, you got another thing coming. I'm like, yeah, I can see that ain't gonna work out. We got to find something. There's this thing called a computer. We should get one of them. We had no idea what the heck one was. And I remember calling a guy, an ad in a magazine for a software program for the refuse industry. Back then we called it the garbage industry. We didn't even call it refuse. And I called the guy and I said, hey, I see you got this thing that maybe can like you push a button and like bills come out of it. It's magic. And he said, yep, I got a program that's a utility program. He goes, you got a computer? I'm like, nope, never had a computer. What do I need for a computer? And the guy, he said, I'll tell you what. He said he was from Carmel, Indiana. I'll never forget. I actually became very good friends with him. I had his software run it for up until about 5 years ago. We finally outgrew it and went to a different one. But he became a friend of mine, and I learned a ton about what he did for our industry as I learned to run it. But he said, I'll tell you what. He goes, if you'll meet with me, I'll fly up to Minnesota, up to Duluth. Where's Duluth? I told him. He goes, ooh, maybe I rethink that. But he said, I'll fly up, and he says, I'll bring a demo with me, a computer and everything. And if you like it, if you promise me that you'll buy it if you're sincere and not make me waste my time. I said, yep. So he comes up, he's got this big box of computer. You can imagine back in the 80s or 70s, whatever it was. And he sets it up in our living room of our house, because that's where our office was. And he turns this thing on, and it's as big as our TV at that time. And he gets this thing out and he puts this thing in, and he shows us this, some sampling of another hauler's accounts. And we're like, you gotta be kidding me. That's magic. We gotta have that, right? So we bought it sight unseen, had no idea. Then I had to call somebody and find out what hardware we needed. Somebody had to sell us a computer. And thank God my wife's brother was pretty savvy. He worked for 3M at the time. He was a pretty sharp guy. He came up and got it all set up for us. And we just learned. We just sat there, and I don't know how many times we called the guy and said, we got her locked up again. You know how it goes. It's like, I don't know. And then you'd start to panic. You think you lost everything, and he'd tell you, just unplug it, plug it back in. It'll come back on. And
Isn't that interesting?
it was a great learning thing, because from that point forward, I wasn't afraid of the technology, right? There's many times I did something that took a pretty sharp technician to get it back that I shouldn't have done. But I would always tell people, and I still do this to this day, any software training we have, I tell them we want to run it for a week or a month before you come in and do the training. Because we're going to get familiar with it. When you got the deer in the headlight look, and nobody's asking no questions, we don't know how to run a thing. But if we've had a week or two of playing around with it, as long as we can't screw it up, man, you get a lot of questions now. And you get, when a guy comes in, you can really make some progress. So that's how I learned. I mean, my wife and I learned together, and we screamed together, we yelled at each other together, and we eventually had a pretty good operation with that. And remember the day when they told you when that computer came, Tom, it was going to free up all this time for you, and you were going to have so much more free time?
I'm still looking for it, Dan. I'm still looking for it.
So I will say I don't have any more free time. I've probably got a lot more information at my fingertips than I ever had, right? I waste a lot more time with worthless data that I work on that nobody ever uses, but it's a wonderful tool. It's opened us up to being able to do so much more and be so much more powerful in your business and making decisions. But it didn't free us up to have all this free time to go fishing and hunting. I know that.
No, it definitely did. It gave you the ability to grow the company, so you had more work to do, Dan.
Right.
Dan,
right.
I have a question. Going back to the self-loading trucks, from a safety standpoint, you alluded to early on that there was a lot of back injuries, shoulder injuries, lugging things around. Did you see a big change from a safety and health standpoint with your employees at that point, because they weren't having to lug everything around?
You're gonna like this, Tom. I would say we didn't see any less injuries, we just seen different injuries.
Hmm.
So back in the day, a guy that worked on a garbage truck was a very fit human being. He didn't have much fat on him. He was very athletic usually, he was a physical 8 hour plus a day. And he was, he didn't need to go to the gym and work out. He was getting it at work. Today's employee, needs to supplement their day with exercise. They don't get the exercise now doing the job. So if you don't keep on your regiment, you can let yourself go. And we've seen probably more injuries because people are not in as good a shape as they maybe should have. And a few times they do have to get out of the truck, they may wrench their back or twist their ankle or do something that basically they're just not used to doing anymore. And we don't, like I say, we don't have the back problems, we don't have the shoulder problems, but we still have, ailments that been a little disappointing because yeah, we would have thought that it's gotten better. I'm not saying it's not better, but it hasn't gone away. There's still, we still have our share of problems during the course of the year. Some of it's guys making poor choices, maybe trying to do something they shouldn't, with a cart that's maybe stuck in or pulling it out or trying to throw something up over the top that they shouldn't. But a lot of it's just, we joked about, are we going to need to get a workout area to give our employees the chance to stay fit, because everybody's life's busy and it's hard to get to the gym. I'm not a big gym guy. I've never been a member of one. If I got free time, I ain't going to the gym, but, but I can see where it definitely has changed our industry. Our job is not a dirty job. It's not a physical job anymore. Like I said, we've got people that are 60 plus years old doing it every day. We've got people that are, on the high end of the scale doing it every day. But back in the early days, that you'd never have any of those. They couldn't make it.
Dan, let's talk about some regulations. You got early on into the recycling industry and the separation of cardboard and plastics from the actual trash itself. How did that change your industry, and were regulations pushing that you had to go there?
Yeah, that was the biggest change that's come since I've been in this business is the mandatory recycling. That was October of 1990, like I referenced. That's when the state decided that any recycling in your trash needed to be separated. And you've seen the evolution of cities that had of certain size had to offer it at the curb for their customers. Rural areas use township sheds like we have out in our rural areas so people could bring it, but it had to be available. So most areas leaned on the haulers to carry that out. So we were forced via ordinances that were written both at the WLSD at that time and the city of Duluth that pretty much made it mandatory that the hauler offered it. One of the differences of our area than most areas was we had to fund it also. So there was no government money, there was no grants, it was all done on the private sector. So we were told we had to offer this service every other week in the city, and we could be as minimum as once a month in the rural areas, but we had to pay for it. And at that time, they were very careful how they set up that state statute, and they weren't allowing you to charge for it either. You couldn't charge somebody that recycled less or more than somebody that didn't. Everybody had to pay the same, so they would get you to hopefully want to do it, because economics is what is a big factor in getting people to do things. And so it was a real challenge for us because we had to convince you you're going to pay for this whether you use it or not, and you're going to pay for it. So garbage almost doubled in price overnight. And that was a very, very tough time with your customer base, right? So a lot of people didn't want it, but they had to pay for it. And so there was a lot of animosity going on. And, we're just trying to navigate and do our job and do what was mandated on us. And economics were not really thought of when it was put in place, right? It was not a money maker. It never has been. It still isn't. From the economic side, recycling is really questionable, but there's reasons why you do it. So, we seen it come, and just like today, Tom, no different than what we just went through. You can complain and you can grovel and you can point the finger and you can find all these excuses why you don't want to do something, or you can figure out a way to do it. And one of the best piece of advice my dad gave me and this computer guy was, every time change comes, it's an opportunity. And you have to look at it that way. I know some days it's very hard to look at that opportunity and say, that's a good thing. But I've always embraced it as that, okay, there's an opportunity here. I got to find the opportunity. And, a lot of times I was able to grow our business because of that opportunity. Maybe, find a way to raise some revenue off of that opportunity. Maybe find some equipment that was, changed because of that opportunity. So I always say to people, you can grumble all you want, but it's happening. So you're either gonna find a way to do it or you're getting left behind. And, the consumer drives what goes on in the world, and you know it more than I, because you're dealing, selling retail. If you don't give them what they want, they're not coming back. They're not buying. And you can have the greatest idea and what you think is the greatest product, and if they don't buy it, there's a lot of good ideas that get scrapped.
Absolutely, Dan. So answer one thing as we're talking about recycling here. There's this term called wish cycling. Can you explain to us what that actually means?
Well, that's a term that's evolved because people try to throw everything away that they think is recyclable. So not everything's recyclable. And a lot of that, we run our own recycle center. So we're very familiar with what goes on in the marketplace and what the dynamics of recycling are. And it's not one size fits all. So we live in Minnesota, which has, different standards, different markets, different rules than in other parts of the country. We live in Duluth, which has different markets, rules, and idiosyncrasies in Minneapolis. So we have to find things that make sense to recycle, right? Both economically and they make sense for the consumer. And sometimes people want to recycle everything because they may see a symbol on it, or they heard somebody else did it, or now with the internet, you can pretty much see what everybody's doing across the country or world. They might have seen that. And so they like to say they're taking place in recycling, and they threw all this into the recycling bin, and a lot of times they may be contaminating that recycling. They may be making it worse. So wish cycling is doing something you want or wish would happen, not necessarily as what's going on in your market or your program. So we're looking for quality, not quantity. So when you get in and when we pick this stuff up and bring it back to our recycle center and have to market it, that's when you find out what the markets want, right? And the market's only going to take what they want. So you learn real quick that if you don't send the market what they want, they either shut you off or they send it back. And that's no good, because now you got to pay to clean it up and then send it to somebody else. So we were very stringent, more than our competitors, because we were running our own MRF on what we would accept. And being different than a lot of haulers is we not only picked it up, we processed it. So in a lot of cases, the hauler hauls it to somebody else, out of sight, out of mind. So as long as I picked it up, I didn't get in trouble with my customer or my boss. I dropped it off. It was dirty, but that's somebody else's problem. Well, in our case, no, you just dropped it into our own facility. And now you created another problem for somebody else that works for us or ourselves. So we were very tough on our guys to work on educating their customers to do the things the right way. And we only want quality recycling that's recyclable. You know, and one of the things that hurts us up here, thing that's helped us get to where we're at. So Duluth at one time was one of only 2 places in the whole country that had a system called volume-based pricing. And that was started back in the 80s. So that's currently what's in place. And that is you pay, the more you throw away, the more you pay. So you got these different size carts. They each come with a different price, and it's, you know, usually $7 to $10 between each level. So that really got people to recycle, right? So you can talk about the right thing to do, but boy, when you were telling them, hey, you can save $7 a month if you use a recycle cart and have less trash. Wow. We went to an area that nobody in the country ever got to this quick. We were at 80% participation within the first couple of years. Unheard of. But it was because of this volume-based pricing, right? People figured out, hey, I can save some money, or I don't want to pay more than I need to. And if I just do a little extra work and do the right thing, it's pretty simple. So us in San Francisco were the only 2 that had this for many, many years. It's been adopted in a few places since, but not real prevalent in the country. So what that did is it got us to get a lot of participation, but that also is creating now the backlash is this wish recycling. The more, and I don't dangerously don't even want to talk about this because I hope somebody ain't gonna do it, is, you know, the more you take out of your trash bin and get over in that recycle cart, the smaller that trash bin can get, and maybe I can save some money. So we've seen some people try to use that as an incentive to save money and then contaminate the recycling. So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Our story to the customers then on wish cycling is educate yourself, call Hartel's Garbage if you're a customer, and ask questions, and you'll get educated so you're not throwing and contaminating your recycle.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got tremendous amount of resources. Our drivers carry tags, so if they see something, they're going to leave you a gentle reminder. People sometimes get a little worked up. It's not a tag that's scolding you. It's an educational thing to let you know. If you're not told that you're doing something wrong, how do you know? So we have all these different things they can mark on a tag. Our website is tremendous for educating you, very user friendly. That, you know, if you got any questions, you can usually find them on our website, the answer. If not, there's pop-ups there. You can ask anybody question and they'll come right to our office and we'll respond to you. So yeah, we highly encourage people to ask, do the right thing. And if you got any question, just ask. It's very simple.
Education.
Yeah. And that's a never-ending thing, right? You know, you'll never stop educating recycling. One of the challenges of Duluth is we're a tourist town and we're a college town, right? And people don't know how many people come and go all year long. So we got this big tourist faction that come, and a lot of people come to our events, and they may come from parts of the country that don't even recycle. They may come from parts of the country that recycle different ways. And they come to Duluth and we expect them to know our rules. Well, how would they know that? So very tough to deal with the tourist side of it. And we've spent a lot of time in education and materials that are on the bins and all of that. And then the college. So you got a, I don't know what, 7, 8, 10,000 turnover every year with the 3 colleges. So you educate them, and then a whole 7 or 8 new bunch of them come next year. And next year. So it's a never ending thing. It'll never go away. You're always educating. And as years go on, the younger generation accepts recycling and should do it better as time goes on than guys like you and I that never had to do it.
Absolutely. Dan, a couple of quick questions. How many total vehicles today in your fleet?
Our fleet is probably, I would say in the low forties. We have pieces of equipment that are available. We've got a few more than that that are in the boneyard, as my kid calls it, that need to go away. But yeah, we count on about 40 in our fleet to do what we got to do in the course of a week.
From one when your dad had it to 40, and how many employees do you have today?
We're in the low here again. I think we're in the low to middle forties. Our high point was 55 when we were running our recycle center. We had 55 employees. That's the highest we ever were at. Since we stopped sorting and outsourced that, now we'd like to be around 45, Tom, but I can't find enough of them right now. So we're hiring. If anybody's out there, we're looking for drivers.
Yeah, and we won't poke that bear too much, will we?
No, we're about three down from where pre-pandemic where we were maybe before the pandemic showed up.
That's great. So, folks, our special guest today is Dan Hartel, the president and CEO and owner of Hartel's DBJ Disposal Company.
I gotta correct you, Tom, for a second. Hartel's Disposal. We rebranded ourselves back to our original name. The DBJ was for a partner that I had, Daryl B. Johnson, when we joined our companies. And when my kids came aboard, we renamed the company back to its original. It's called Hartel's Disposal now.
Hartel's Disposal, folks. I stand corrected. And you know what? A lot of work, a lot of energy. Dan has worked his tail off. So for any of our listeners that are in the Duluth area, I tell you what, our businesses, we use Dan personally. My family uses Dan. And I wish I had time to tell the story, but one of your drivers gets a big kudos from me for what they did at 20 below zero this winter. So great people that you employ as well. But Dan, we're going to switch gears here. We're not going to talk any garbage or trash for a couple minutes here. We're going to go personal on you because you know what? Our listeners want to learn a little bit more about you, Dan, the person, not Dan, the business owner. And I'll tell you what an entrepreneur Dan is. We call this, Dan, our packed question segment. Favorite hobby outside of work?
Snowmobiling.
Favorite place you've ever traveled?
That's a tough one. I haven't traveled a lot, but that's tied to snowmobiling. I go up in the mountains in Wyoming and Idaho, and that's my safe haven. So mountains in Idaho, probably.
Favorite artist or band?
Not much for that, but Van Halen's always been on my playlist, still is to this day.
And you know what? You talked about a piece of business advice that you received from your dad and one of your good friends when you got computerized for the first time. But what's the best piece of life advice, Dan, that you have ever received?
Never quit. I've been driven all my life, and that was advice I got, and hopefully I've instilled in my kids to just because it gets tough, you don't give up. You find a way, and you just never give up. You never quit. And life, you're gonna have many challenges. It's I don't know if it's getting any easier.
Dan, and how do our listeners find your company? What are your website and social handles?
Our website is hartels.com. That was a byproduct of simplifying our name, so that worked out. Hartel with an S.com. I'm the wrong guy to ask a lot of these, Tom. I'm not their social media guy. I know we got Facebook and we got all the stuff, but hartels.com is all I'm kind of familiar with. Otherwise, you can find us on the internet, and we still answer the phone.
I love that. They still answer the phone, folks. Dan, I cannot thank you enough. You know what? I learned so much today because I saw the transition from when I was young, when it was just the guys coming early in the morning and banging metal cans together and waking me up, to all the technology that you have to use and all the equipment changes and the capital investment that goes into your industry. And as an entrepreneur, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate you. This is a cool thing that you go back and talk to businesses that have been around. I appreciate it. I was glad when I got a chance to get on, I was glad to take advantage of it.
Well, thank you, Dan. We appreciate you and we appreciate what you do, keeping our environment healthy and safe and keeping the environment clean for picking up our trash and our recycling in a state that is pretty big on it. Thanks
Yep.
much.
Thank you.
And folks, until next time, unplug from the indoors and recharge in the outdoors.